Hey guys, I think we are live. All right, so welcome tonight to Back to School IEP Project live workshop. I think since April, or March even, it's been a really long time since we've done one. I think the end of the year we all kind of needed a break. I don't know about you, but I really needed a break. We were all so busy with school ending and such a rough year that I was very excited to spend some time just doing normal kid things and no school things for the whole summer. So I want to wait just a second to let everybody kind of log in here. Feel free to like and share this so that it reaches more parents. I can't believe that I am saying this, but like summer went by so fast, and in just a few weeks we're all going back to the classroom. Like I said, last year was a tough year, right? I don't think that any of us have had a year like that or that difficult of a year before as a whole for everybody. And I am really looking forward to this year and hopefully not repeating some of those same difficulties. Most of us were remote for at least part of the year, and we only spent a portion of the year inside of a classroom. Our kids have changed, their needs have changed, and although our IEPs should really be reflecting who our children are and what those changes are, there is still a lot that's going on that's new for our kids and for our school and for their classrooms and for their teachers. So today I want to give you a few tips that are going to help you feel prepared for special education this year and beyond this year too, beyond all of those things that you probably already know. So at the end I'm going to answer any questions that you might have, so go ahead and leave them in the comments. And I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit more about IEP reviews that are open right now. So if you've ever wondered if your child's IEP is good enough, you're going to want to stick around for the details on that IEP review. So first thing I want to remind you guys as we get back into school, getting prepared for school with our special education children, you guys should be introducing your child to their team. Even if they know their team, let's reintroduce them. Things have changed, our kids have changed, schools changed. A lot of them are getting new teachers, so let's spend some time introducing our kids. Again, even if your child knows their team, a lot of things have changed since we left school in the spring. Not just with like health guidelines and what to expect at school, but your child is probably a really different child from when they left school in the spring. Some of them are in ESY, some of them are in outside therapy. Maybe they've made some progress or had some regression that you've noticed. But you kind of want to paint a picture of who your child is. So you can include things like what motivates them, how do they learn best, what kind of things are they good at, what kind of things do they like, how should the teacher handle it if they're struggling, what does it look like when they're struggling. It doesn't have to be anything lengthy, kind of like when we talk about parent input, you can bullet point it if you need to, but email it over to the school prior to school starting. The IEP is going to include that parent input statement that we've talked about before, but this getting to know me or all about me thing is going to be kind of like a snapshot of your kiddo, so that going in on that first day, everybody has an idea of where your child's at and what your observation is of your child or what you know about your child. Introducing your student to the teacher is also going to help build rapport. Despite kind of what's going on. Maybe we're going back to school with masks, maybe we're not, we're definitely still social distancing. Rapport building is really, really important for our kids, but given the circumstances, it can be really difficult. So this is going to give your teacher kind of like a shoe in, just like a little foot in the door to building rapport with our kids so that they can start building some positive relationships for them. So for those that have registered for this event, check your email in the morning. I put together a brand new back to school all about me template, and I'm going to email it to you guys out in the morning with the replay of this video. That template is going to allow you to kind of fill in all of the important things that your child's teacher and team need to know. It's different from traditional All About Me pages because it is geared towards special education students. We talk a lot about, like, what does it look like when I'm struggling? What does the teacher need to know when they're struggling? How can they help them when they're struggling? Those kinds of things. What are their motivators? What things are hard for them? What are parent goals? Those kind of things are not always included in traditional All About Me pages. So I wanted to make sure that I included them in this one so that it's geared towards our kids and not just general kids. So the next tip is to make sure everybody has a copy of the IEP. I have said this before, but this has totally happened to me before where a teacher did not have a copy of the IEP. Email it to the team if you want to. Maybe you just check in with them. Hey, do you have a copy of the IEP? But don't assume that the school's provided the gen ed teacher with a copy of the IEP. The day before school one year, we were at school supply drop-off, and the teacher didn't even know that my child had an IEP. And it wasn't her fault. Sometimes things kind of just get lost in the shuffle. In our case, there was like a change in roles and in the person who took care of that. She wasn't in the building anymore, and so it just kind of got skipped over. So somebody thought that they had it taken care of, and they didn't. Things happen. I wasn't happy about it. We had a conversation, but there was no fighting. I just made sure that the teacher knew. In that case, I asked about his flexible seating options because there was none, and she was like, "Oh, I don't believe in flexible seating," and I was like, "Well, it's in his IEP," and she was like, "Oh, I didn't know he had an IEP." So it was like an awkward kind of conversation, but it really was like for the best because it opened up this conversation between her and I, and for my son to tell her what he needed to be successful in the classroom, and it really was a great year. But things happen, and like I said, it's totally okay to take charge of your child's IEP and make sure that everybody is informed, but please be nice. Our teachers have a really tough job this year coming out of last year, so we want to start the year out on the right foot with them. Positive interactions is as much as possible, even if there's some negativity before, we can always kind of start over. So if you're going to give them this copy of the IEP, make sure that you're doing it gently, being nice about it, assuming that they have it, but just covering all your bases sort of thing. The next tip is to discuss changes with your child. We went through this last year where school looked really different, and maybe we were remote, maybe we were in person, but school still doesn't look the same as it did 2 years ago, and it probably doesn't look the same as it did last year. My district right now hasn't even made decisions on exactly what school's going to look like, so this sucks for us who need heads up for our kids and advance notice and have these big decisions or discussions, because we're probably going to be last minute talking about the differences and the changes in school. But it's something that is important, I think, for us to discuss with our child. If your child's in the classroom, you want to talk about what social distancing might look like. Are they wearing masks? What does that look like? Are there any expected schedule changes? How can they advocate for a mask break or any other kind of break if they need to? Do they know how to self-advocate for themselves if they need something? And then I really hate saying something like this, but because I have pretty strong personal feelings on this issue, but regardless of what your personal feelings are on social distancing and masks, especially in our younger kids, the words that we're using to discuss those things with our child, it's going to make a difference in how they handle it at school. And we want to set them up for success. So just be aware of the language that you're using, regardless of how you might feel about it personally. that is like a whole nother topic. But I just want to be aware of the language that we're using around our kids so that we can set them up to be successful in the classroom. The next tip is establishing a routine prior to starting school. This kind of seems like a no-brainer, right? Like when we were kids, 2 weeks before school started, my mom was like, oh, we have a bedtime again. And we were like, no bedtime. But, getting back into that routine of going to bed early and on time prior to school starting, it really helps get our bodies and our brains prepared for learning, getting them back into a routine. It is not a secret that kids who aren't getting enough sleep at night probably are going to struggle with behavior during the day. Adults too, probably. So whether you're remote or in person or whatever school looks like for you, that same kind of rule applies. If possible, ask your school for a daily schedule, because a lot of the times these schedules are changing from before. Our lunch times are differently. Our lunch times are spread out. We might have more snack times than normal. But if you can get a good idea of what that daily schedule is going to look like, you can start abiding by those kind of things loosely, if possible, at home. Because there's nothing worse than a child who's used to eating lunch at 11 a.m., not having lunch till 1:20, and then starving for 2 hours. Because that really does happen at school. So if you know that your child has a really early lunch or a really late lunch, it might be beneficial to try and abide by those kind of lunch breaks so that you can get them into that habit or routine of having lunch at that time so that they're not at school hungry. Mornings are traditionally like the hardest part of our day, and it seems like this is like a really tough time for most families because we're all trying to rush our kids out the door. Some of us are working from home and trying to get back here for meetings, and some of us are getting out of the house. We're all getting ready at the same time in the morning. One of the things that can be really helpful is using visual schedules or checklists in the morning. It really helps foster independence in that morning routine, and it really eliminates the need for you to remind them constantly of what's next. So instead of you saying, hey, did you brush your teeth? Hey, did you eat breakfast? Hey, did you pack your backpack? You just refer back to the schedule. Hey, what's next on your schedule? Have you checked off all of the boxes on your checklist? Is there anything that you've missed? Look at your schedule. What's next on your schedule? Those kind reminders are really consistent, but it also helps our kids learn those routines and schedules and be able to do this routine independently. Next tip is to pull out your child's IEP and review those IEP goals. Ask your school. I'm sure some of you are getting communication about what health requirements are and how that has changed school. But even ask a person on your team, like, we have these new changes. What's changing in my child's day from last year or from the year before, if they weren't in school last year, compared to now? So will there still be small groups? Are we pulling out those small groups? Will they do more push into the classroom? A lot of the time specials have been in the classroom instead of out of the classroom. Is that a change that your student needs to be aware of? Are they consolidating minutes throughout the week? So instead of 2 speech sessions for 15 minutes, they're going to try and do 1 for 30 minutes. I've seen that. Again, back to masks. Are children required to wear a mask? When are they required to wear a mask? Is the location of where their services are being provided changing? As a parent, you need to understand how those changes will affect your child's day and also kind of give them a heads up on it, because we're having those conversations about changes with our kids so that they are prepared for school. Most likely, these kind of things are going to be similar if you were in school in the spring, but with so many constant changes, I feel like it's like every week I'm getting an email from State Board of Education or from our school district with new changes. It's really hard to keep track of everything, but it's really important for you to know what your child's day is going to look like and how their IEP is impacted by these changes. You also want to keep track of, that was my dog and it scared me for a second. You also want to keep track of progress reports as they come out. Usually they come out around report card time, and you want to compare those to IEP goals. So is what we're doing working? All of these changes that we've implemented, is this an effective method of services? Like, is this appropriate for your child? Are we making expected progress? So sorry, my dog's having a little cough over there. Is our child making, or your child making expected progress? And do you know why or why not? I can't tell you how many times they read a progress report that says making expected progress, but then doesn't give any details on why they're making expected progress. You know, your speech therapist might have the data to support that, but they're not sharing those details with you, and it's important for you to know that making expected progress or not making expected progress is, they can back that up with some sort of evidence. We need to know why they think that they're making expected progress. What have they accomplished that leads us to think that they're on track to completing this goal in that 1 year time? Don't be afraid to ask for something different if however services are being provided is not working for your child with all of these changes. Schools are still responsible for providing our kids with a free, appropriate public education. So if something isn't appropriate, we have to communicate that with a team. But I will tell you, like, we need to give them some time to adjust to a new school year. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, a few tips down. But if something isn't working, make sure that you're communicating that with your team so that we can improve that if we need to. So, speaking of the IEP, you want to make sure that all of your paperwork is organized. On Sunday, I'm going to be going over how to use my IEP binder organization system. I updated the system recently because previously it was the system that I use personally that I put together, but I had a lot of feedback from parents that still felt like they just were really unsure of like what questions to ask, who do they talk to, how do they know what to look for, those kind of things, specifically when it comes to behavior. So the new system that we're going to be talking about on Sunday is going to include like what to ask, some prompts for you so that you know what to look for, and then there's some data collection tools in there specifically for parents. So if you don't use my system, that's okay. I just want to make sure you guys have everything in order and ready to go and organized before school starts. Maybe you don't need a physical binder, maybe you want to do it digital, that's okay, whatever works for you, but just make sure you have everything in order. I usually tell parents that we should be keeping at least 2 years of IEPs in our binder so that we have that to reference, because we should not be working on IEP goals for, well, really we shouldn't be working on them for longer than a year, but if we've been working on them for longer than 2 years, we're doing something wrong. So next tip is, if needed, schedule a check-in meeting. So typically this meeting should happen about 6 to 8 weeks after school starts. So remember I said that we kind of need to give schools time or teachers time to adjust to the new school year, our kids time to adjust to a new school year. So 6 to 8 weeks is usually when I recommend that we have that check-in meeting or that progress meeting. I want you guys to be keeping track of your observations of how school is working, how the routine is working, any kind of behavior, new behavior, changes in behavior, how homework is going, all of those things. And communicate that with your team early on with any kind of concerns. School schedules, they fill quickly with IEP meetings, and although we can call an IEP meeting at any time, we never really want to wait till the last minute because we want to make sure that we're given enough time and we're respectful of everybody's schedule, including our own. There's nothing worse than saying, oh my gosh, things are really bad, we need a meeting this week, and the school says, well, we have 30 minutes on Friday before school starts. And that really isn't enough time to discuss what your concerns are. So early on, if you're 3-4 weeks into school and you say, hey, this really isn't working, can we go ahead and get something on the schedule? Communicate with your team so that they know that that is something that you think is important and that's something that you want to get on the schedule. We already spoke about All About Me, so I want to kind of go back to that, but I want to talk about our older kids. So the All About Me that I put together is probably not appropriate for middle school and high school kids. It's kind of juvenile, but it has some good bones to it. Some of the prompts in there and questions that it asks you are things that might be important for your children's middle school and high school teams to know. But at middle school and high school, we really should be pushing to prepare our children to self-advocate in the classroom. So we talked about going over the IEP, but now is the time to also review that IEP with your child. Even in elementary school, we can still be reviewing the IEP and talking about the things that they need to know in the classroom, because if they have an accommodation and nobody's offering it to them and they're not asking for it, this is a really good opportunity for them to self-advocate and ask for something that they think that they need. So we're going to review the IEP with our child. We're going to read through the goals. We're going to read through accommodations, related services. We're going to use this time before school starts to help them understand what their rights are, what they can ask for, kind of those goals, like what are we working towards, and who are they working with, because sometimes that changes. Talk about any kind of anxieties that they might have about going back to school with all of the changes that we're experiencing, and ask them, what do they want their teachers to know about them? I like my middle schoolers and my high schoolers to email teachers an introduction of themselves. It can be a really powerful way for them to introduce themselves using their own words and really encouraging that self-advocacy. It's also a really good opportunity to help them start building connections with new staff. Especially for our middle school and high schoolers, they have more than one teacher. They have lots of teachers throughout their day, lots of staff throughout their day. This can be a good opportunity for them to build connection, especially for our kids who maybe are a little bit softer spoken in the classroom or have a harder time raising their hand to answer questions because of anxiety or whatever other reason we might have going on. But overall, I just want to remind you guys that we should be kind to our children's teachers and team. There are a lot of frustrated parents, and I don't blame you. This special education has been really, really hard this last year, but regardless of how we feel about changes in school, our children's teacher, they didn't create these changes, these COVID type changes. We're all under a lot of stress. And we should be kind of understanding of how challenging this is for all of our teachers, and not just the teachers, but all of us. Teachers should be respectful of parents too, because we've been through a lot of changes also. But I want to tell you guys that most of our teachers are going into this year with the best intentions, because they want to redeem themselves after last year. I can't tell you how many teachers I've talked to that have said that exact thing. I can't wait for school to start because I want to redeem myself. I feel like I didn't get to teach the way that I want to. But they're still burnt out from last year, and that's going to make this year really, really hard. And I hate that that is a reality, but it totally is. Most of them don't like the new way of school, and they're not getting a say-so in any of the decisions that are being made for our school. It's a really hard time to be a teacher, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be asking for what our child needs. You absolutely need to be asking for everything your child needs, and again, in writing or it didn't happen, and we should be getting creative with our child's team to make sure that our child's unique needs are being met. So be kind, but don't be afraid to speak up when you need to. This is your child that we're talking about, and so yes, we should be respectful and we should be kind, but we should also ask for everything that we think our kids need and communicate everything that we think that the team needs to know about our child. So I know that there are quite a few questions here, but before I get to all the questions, I want to tell you guys a little bit about IEP reviews. So almost every parent that I work with tells me that they are really unsure about what's written in the IEP. And it's not always the same thing that they're unsure about, but there's something in the IEP that they don't feel confident in. Maybe it's goals or services or present levels of performance. Maybe it's the notes and how they're written. There's always something that parents feel unsure of. And sometimes the IEP teams are friendly and accommodating. I would say most teams are friendly and accommodating, but parents don't know what they should be asking for because You're not a special education professional, you are a parent. And your job is to be an expert on your child, not on the IEP. So just because everything sounds great in an IEP meeting, it doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. There is always room for improvement in your child's IEP. So an IEP review is kind of a chance to get your child's IEP on the best track. It's like a second opinion on your child's IEP. Until Sunday, reviews are open and up for grabs for the first 10 people. This review that I'm doing is typically only available for current clients. I am too busy during the school year to do just IEP reviews, so I reserve these for full service clients only, but I am opening up the first 10 spots until the end of July, and after that there will only be, these will only be available to full service clients. But the review is going to include 30-minute consultation where we get on the phone together. We talk about what your parent goals are, what your concerns are, where you want your child to go, what you think is important. We're going to talk about prioritizing accommodations, even if you're learning remotely still, whatever those accommodations are, what is really important, what do we need to know, what do we need to absolutely have for our kids. I'm gonna give you a complete review of the IEP, so that means I'm gonna fix any bad goals that you might have. I'm gonna rewrite some of the language in there so that we make sure that it's written in a positive way. And I'm gonna give you the exact special education language that you have to use to ask for what you need and actually get it. And then you're also gonna get at least 3 specific things that you can add or change in the IEP to kind of maximize progress and get our kids on the best track going forward. So we're going to schedule a call once you grab that IEP review. We're going to schedule a call so that we can talk about what your concerns and your goals are. And then I'm going to review the IEP to find those opportunities for improvement to help your child at school. My review is kind of different from when the school writes the IEP because I am not working with your child. So I'm kind of this unbiased third party focused on what you think is important as a parent. So your goals and your concerns are my priority when I do this review. So after the review, you're going to have actionable steps that you can bring to that next meeting that are going to make a bigger impact on your child's IEP than in previous meeting. Plus, like I said, I'm giving you the exact language that you need. Like literally when I give you the review, you can copy and paste it and send it to the school. So that you can ask for what your child needs in the most effective way so that you actually get what you're asking for and nobody has to fight about it, which is kind of the best part. So if you know that your child needs more but you're not sure what to ask for, make sure that you sign up for that IEP review. I'm going to leave the link in the comments, but if you say yes in the comments, I'm going to send you the direct link right after this. Normally the IEP review is $107, but until Sunday it is $97. So like I said, you can leave me a message here. You can head over to my website to go ahead and grab it. But let's go ahead and get over to the questions. So I know that there was a few over here. Stephanie says hi. So good language to explain. We just want to make sure this is in regards to talking about changes at school in regards to masks and health requirements and social distancing and things like that. We just want to make sure that we're talking about this in a positive way so that our kids aren't going to school and telling the teacher that they think masks are dumb. And maybe that's how you feel and that's totally okay. But we want to talk about it in a positive way because if this is the expectation for our kids and we are sending our kids to school, we need them to follow the expectations so that they're not unsuccessful at school. So we want to talk about whatever those changes are in a positive way if we can. Says my school won't give me a schedule. For the summer I still don't have one and it's the last week. They've not even been able to tell me who his therapists are and this has been a struggle every year. So I know that you know this, but you want to make sure that you put that request in writing. I know your son Stephanie, so I know that he needs a heads up on what's happening and that's what you need to put in your email to the school. That in order for my child to be successful at school this year, I need XYZ prior to the start of school. I think that totally makes sense. And this can also be something that you add into the IEP so that it's something that legally they have to provide. I've had clients in there that the language has to be a little bit loose because sometimes there's last minute schedule changes, but it will say something like, given reasonable notice of new school year schedule, given reasonable notice of new staff added to the team, that sort of thing. Anytime we tell them something is not working, they say this is how we do it, and they roll their eyes. I ask for documents stating that, and they say we do not have it. I know you have such a tough team, Stephanie. For other parents, anytime that the school says this is how we do it, you ask them to see the policy, because a lot of the times things happen in a district because that's the way that the district does things, but our kids have individual education plans. And that means that we individualize services based on what their unique needs are, not based on what the district typically does. So ask them to see the policy. Is there a policy on this? If there's not a policy, then we revert back to that individual education plan. And just because you don't do it this way doesn't mean that it can't be done this way. So we need to find a creative solution and a compromise to get things done. I wish my team was accommodating. The last time I asked a question, they said, we did not come here to dissect the bit. That is exactly what we came here to do if it's a behavior intervention plan meeting. At that point, if the team is acting like that, I would have tabled the meeting and said, you know what, we aren't being productive as a team together, and so I'd like to table this meeting until we can refocus and come together in a more positive way. I've absolutely done that before. Sometimes you have to call out the elephant in the room, and if that elephant is negativity, call it out in a respectful way. Nobody wants to reschedule the meeting, so sometimes that is enough to get everybody kind of back on track. Sometimes we just need a couple more minutes. Stephanie, I know you're dealing with a really difficult team, so that is kind of a different situation for you. Okay, so I think I got all of the questions over here. Let me double check really quick. Okay, so I think I've got all of the questions up there. So Thursday, we're going to come back here and we're going to talk about, we're going to have a top secret chat on IEP secrets that you might not know, but you definitely should know. And then Sunday, I'm going to teach you how to keep your IEP organized and document that communication in the most effective way. It really is like a huge change from the IEP binder organizer that I had before. If you had that one, this one's definitely different. The link to both of those events is up in the events tab, or you can let me know below that you want the links and I'll send you a direct link. But if there's any other topics that you ever want me to cover in these workshops, let me know. I try and do a couple of these every month, so if you're new here, go ahead and like and follow the page so that you're notified for the next one. But I try and do live workshops a couple times a month to make sure that you guys are getting as many free resources as possible. So if there's anything that you specifically need to be covered, let me know. I'm happy to do a live on that. But until then, I will see you guys on, Anissa says, any advice moving forward from due process? So if your due process has already been completed, it can be really hard to repair relationships coming out of any kind of negative situation, right? So again, kind of calling out the elephant in the room. Like, I know that we just went through a really difficult time and that we didn't agree on whatever it was, but my goal moving forward is to form positive relationships with the team and rebuild trust on both sides. You can write that in your parent input statement. Sometimes having it in writing is extra helpful. But again, just kind of like calling attention to it. Like, everybody feels awkward and uncomfortable, and the only way we're going to make progress as an IEP team is if we work together. So I think that is probably the best recovery once due process is over. During due process, it can be really difficult too. One of the things that has also been helpful for other parents, so I am a non-legal advocate. I do not do due process. However, I do work with a few attorneys who do due process. So when clients go to the attorney and they have an annual meeting, sometimes I will still attend that annual meeting, and it kind of takes some of the pressure off because the lawyer isn't there. So the lawyer kind of brings a different dynamic to the table. Nothing against special education's attorneys, because I think they're wonderful, but it does kind of change the dynamic. So bringing an advocate who you know isn't going to be fighting at the table and is really going to try and work on positive relationships can also be a really helpful way for you to build kind of trust in your team, even in the middle of sticky situations. So Andrea says my school will jump on that and make it according to their timeline. So there are legal timelines for things. So if you guys aren't sure what the timeline is, you can check out Ideal Law. You can check out Rights Law, has a lot of those on there. A lot of the timelines in there. They literally wrote the book on special education, so that's a really good place to look. But also look at your procedural safeguards and at your state board of education, because they're going to be specific about those timelines depending on what state you're in. Just before COVID hit, we were fighting for a one-on-one. We go back to school in 3 weeks. Should I continue then, or do I need to bring it up with the district again? So that kind of depends on where you left it off. If anytime we need a change at the IEP table, or we need a change in the IEP, we have to have the data to support that. So the data to back up that your child is not successful in class, not successful accessing their education, not successful socially, emotionally, without a one-on-one aid. So we have to have the data to kind of support those things. So sometimes I had a student last year who was running out of the classroom every time he was asked to sit and do work. And that's a safety concern. Like, that's a huge issue. And what was happening was, like, the teacher would call the office and say, oh, he ran in the hallway, but like for a good 2 minutes, nobody really knew where he was. So we got him a one-on-one aid, and it was a one-on-one in the IEP, but the way that we talked about this in the IEP and how that one-on-one would service him was that she would operate more like a classroom aide. So she'd be in the classroom, she'd be there to support everywhere, but we had her as his specific one-on-one aide. That way there was just an extra person there to make sure that he stayed in the classroom. And then in addition to that, we added some supports in the classroom to encourage him to do his work and to identify why he was avoiding that work, what the function of that task avoidance was. There was a lot going on there. So depending on where you're at with that conversation with your district, if you still feel like it's absolutely something that your child needs, bring it up again, put it in writing. Because if it's not in writing, it's not a conversation that happened. But I would absolutely bring it up if you think it's important. I would not wait. Our kids are totally different than they used to be, before COVID. So I think that the school will probably want to take their own data on if the child needs one-on-one. But it's something you should totally bring up with the school if you feel like it's still important. Let's see. Lori says, is there a place that I could look at to find out what could be offered to a high schooler for his IEP? He has a first-time IEP this year. Lori, that is a really hard question for me to answer without knowing why your son has an IEP. So if you want, send me a message. We can set up time for a free consultation. And I can kind of give you some ideas once I kind of learn what he's struggling with at school and whatnot. Andrea says, be careful of using the term reasonable time for advance notice on schedules. It is really vague. You're totally right to be very specific. So Andrea's saying that that's really vague, that we should be really specific in the IEP, like 2 weeks in advance. That protects me as a teacher and as well as the child and family. You're absolutely right. Sometimes, though, we do write things that are vague-ish. I probably wouldn't say reasonable time. I kind of spewed that out, but you're totally right. Sometimes we do use things that are kind of vague, though, because last-minute schedule time changes happen in schools. So we want to protect the child, protect the teacher also, but also be aware that those kind of things might happen. So they might have 2-week schedule changes. That's totally reasonable to put in an IEP, but then things might change. So we have to have a way to kind of talk about both of those things. So my son's tried to run into the street twice. He's escaped the school. Yeah, I know you have such a tough situation, Stephanie. My heart hurts for your boy because I know that he's had such a tough kind of go at school recently. So, okay, so Thursday we're doing top secret IEP secrets. Sunday we're doing IEP organizer events. So let me know in the comments if you guys want links to either one of those, or if you want a link to the IEP review. And then check your email tomorrow morning. I will be sending out that all about me with the replay of this video. And I will talk to you guys later. Have a good night.